Son pronta a te.
Hello and welcome back to Mystery Bel Canto. Joseph Cianciulli here, your host, your founder of Mystery Bel Canto and the Academy of Bel Canto. We are talking today about appoggio. We're going to continue our discussion on the difference between voice building, voice coaching, and voice teaching. We're going to discuss appoggiare. We're going to talk about voice sharing, or vowel sharing, sorry. But let's first start with appoggio, because appoggio is something that's talked about a lot. This is a male voice term. Unless you're a contralto, you're not going to be applying appoggiare to the voice. This is really for the men. And it's misused, it's misunderstood. I've heard so many ridiculous definitions of what appoggio is. So I want to address appoggio first. So appoggio, we're going to talk from a more physiological standpoint. Appoggio is a buildup of subglottal pressure. So as you move up in octave or in scale, as the voice moves upward and up in frequency, there is an increase in subglottal. The glottis is the space between the vocal folds. There's an increase in subglottal pressure, and you feel that physically in the chest area, and you hear it audibly as what we call appoggiare. It is a natural byproduct. Okay, it is a natural byproduct of the rise in pitch paired with an increase in subglottal pressure. And why is there an increase in subglottal pressure? I know this is going to be very, very technical for my singers, but I think you need to hear this. You need to understand it. Dan was very, very adamant that as a singer, you should be an educated singer. You should understand what's happening with your voice. So when I was in school for speech pathology, they would say, the rise and fall of pitch is from the stretching of the vocal folds. Yeah, that the intrinsic musculature is actually contracting and actually tilting the larynx forward, and the folds extend, or they stretch. And Dan said, that's a good explanation. I remember going through it with him. He's like, what would you say is the reason for the rise in pitch? And I told him, he said, no, actually the reason is, and this comes from Dr. Barbara Mathis's clinical work with the SLP of Houston Grand Opera. She had found that it's actually where on the vocal folds, pitch is determined by where the vocal folds are touching. So Dan said that if these are your two vocal folds, you go directly back through the throat, you have looking downward, down the back of the throat, you have your two vocal folds. Now, the higher you go in pitch, the more folds, you still have this kind of vibration happening back to front. It's if you didn't have your head, it just sounded like a buzz zzz, as you were making sound. Now, as you go higher, more the folds are touching. You're still doing this movement, but it's not very big. It's just very small. And the higher you go, there's more fold touching. Okay, and as there's more fold touching, there's obviously a smaller opening for air to pass through. Because there's a smaller opening, there is an increase in the subglottis, or the sub opening of the folds, the pressure coming up from the lungs, because the same amount of air pressure is trying to come through. But as you go, you're in your lower voice, and then as you go higher, more of the folds are connecting, and you go higher and more of the folds are connecting. And because you have a smaller opening and the air is still trying to be pushed or released through, you feel this increase in pressure. Now, appoggio, or the feeling of this increase in subglottal pressure, is a qualitative, or has a qualitative change that is heard in the voice. There's a quality change in the voice. Most people hear this quality change of appoggio and they try to imitate it. And what happens is either they're muscling or manipulating appoggio through their entire range, but appoggio only happens at a very specific point in the range. It happens in the upper middle voice. Okay, really like the middle-ish voice. So for like a tenor, my appoggio starts on D. Yeah, D, a D an octave above middle C. Yeah, so I should not be appoggiating below that. Okay, and I also don't want to be taking the sensation of appoggio or pushing into appoggio, pushing body through passaggio. So Appoggio is really what determines what kind of voice somebody is. When somebody says, oh, my passaggio is on F, so therefore I'm a soprano, or my passaggio is on F, so therefore I'm a tenor. Not necessarily so. In voice building, in bel canto voice building, you first would have to determine where it is the appoggio is showing itself. Okay? This is not something you manipulate, and you definitely, as a teacher, do not encourage through using your own voice to have the singer imitate you. You know, you're not going to go, oh, 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 oh. I need more of the body. You're just going to have them manipulating. You always release sound through to what Dan called the campana and Raz called campana. It's behind the ridge, behind the upper front teeth. It's always released towards campana. And what happens is as you rise in pitch, you'll start to hear as a teacher, there's a qualitative change that happens. Something sounds different. And this is where you have to learn the importance of vowels and consonants and how to use them correctly, because certain vowels for the male voice encourage a stronger sensation for the singer and a stronger audible indicator for the teacher of appoggio. So just so you all know as teachers and singers, the vowel O is the vowel of appoggio, okay? So I'm going to give you an example. My appoggio is around D. I'm just going to do va, okay? Va, 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 va. So va, 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 va. 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 Fast forward. Va, 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 va. Va, 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 va. I'm not in appoggio. Va, 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 va. When I go to D on top, you can hear there's a qualitative change. I could avoid it as a tenor. I can avoid appoggio, and I could spread. And many singers do this. But you have to learn to sing with appoggio as a male singer. You can avoid it. It's very easy to do. You can sing in mix. You could spread. Those are easy things to do. It's very important that singers learn to sing with appoggiare. It's not easy, but if it's trained correctly, it really allows the voice to grow and to expand through the middle voice and up into the upper voice. So how is appoggio built? Because there's, from the videos I've seen, there's a misunderstanding of appoggio and not just of what it is, but also how it's encouraged in the voice. So this is how Dan taught me to hear appoggio. When you have a singer, a new singer, the first step to training the voice is to determine where you're going to start exercise. Okay, so Dan would oftentimes listen. He would have conversations for the first 5 or 10 minutes in our lessons, and I always thought that he just didn't want to start the lesson. He just wanted to catch up because we were close friends as well as I was also as a student I was also his friend, and so we would catch up, and he would be tinkering on the piano. And later, maybe like the 6th year into my study with him, when we were talking about, how do you know where to start at the singer on the piano, or do you always go to the same place? Because I know for a lot of singers, they say, oh, I always start in C, middle C, C4. But Dan said, no, the voice is, you have to meet the voice where the voice is that day. Therefore, you're listening to their speaking voice, and you want to hear where their speaking voice is so that you can release the speaking voice first. Remember what I said in episode 1. The speaking voice, most Americans, English is a language that we speak with a muscled tone. We muscle in the pharynx of the back of the mouth when we speak in English. Therefore, the first job of the teacher is to release the speaking voice, because that's what's being used the most. And then you can take that sensation of release up into the upper voice. Okay, but you can't do that until you first determine where they're speaking that day. And it will change, which is why you have to do it once per lesson at the beginning of every lesson, because depending on if they drank the night before, if they were up late, if they didn't get a lot of sleep, if they were yelling, if they had maybe acidic food and there's some type of misalignment with their stomach, all these things will affect the resonance of the voice. So you have to check where they're resonating first. Okay, so number 1 secret of bel canto: when you start exercise, it is not static. You do not start in the same place. You must every lesson, at the beginning of every lesson, you must reevaluate where they are starting. So you found where they're starting, okay? And you give them a simple exercise, descending exercise, because remember, I touched on this in episode 1 a little bit. Descending exercises release, ascending exercises challenge. Why? Why is that? The reason is when you have a descending exercise, you're starting from a vocal fold closure, but as you go down, there's more and more space. Remember we talked about the rise in pitch. With the rise in pitch comes a smaller opening. And when you're descending in pitch, the opening is opening. The opening is opening. The vocal folds have more space as you're going down. So more and more and more, which is very releasing on the folds. Okay, it's very releasing. It's very therapeutic for the folds to go descending. And if you want to go even more therapeutic, you would then have a glide, completely on the breath. Okay, and through the posture. You would have a glide rather than note to note to note. Okay, so there's levels of invasiveness. You have glide, you have note to note, you have small steps, you have steps in certain directions. So now why then when you go up in pitch are we challenging? Because remember, singers and teachers and SLPs, as you rise in pitch, okay, the folds are getting closer. Yeah, you have more and more of the folds touching as the air is coming through. Okay, you go up in pitch, more of the folds are touching. You go down in pitch, less of the folds are touching. They're still making this kind of wavy movement, but there's more of the folds touching as that wavy movement is happening. Okay, so as you're going up, you're testing to see if the folds don't pop open and release breath or leak breath, which is not what we want as a male singer. It'll put you in a mix. We want a close connection to the folds. This is why belting makes a more mature and loud sound. Okay, what belters are doing is they're forcing the folds to a closer position. Okay, we're going to talk about breath and how important breath is in a later episode. But just so you're aware, when the folds are at a closer connection, which the coperto breath brings the folds to a natural close connection before you start, and you stop the breath before you start. When that happens, you are at the optimal closure of the folds, and you want to try and maintain that throughout your exercise and into your repertoire. It takes time for the folds to learn to hold that closer position, but when they hold a closer position, you get more body, you get more connected quality of sound, you get squillo, which we'll talk about later, squillo, which then leads the body. We never lead with body, we lead with squillo. So when you're rising in pitch, you're going to inevitably increase and test how well the folds can close and maintain that closure without muscling and getting involved. Okay, so this is why belters oftentimes their voice will fatigue very fast because they're forcing the folds to a closer position, which of course creates more sound, but it also creates a very abrasive environment for the folds, and that will wear on the epithelial layers of the fold. It will cause friction, which will cause irritation and eventually inflammation, which, like we talked about with the drinking, a lot of singers will then feel like they have a bigger sound, and they'll ask questions like, "Why isn't everyone doing this?" But then a week later, their voice is just done; it's like spent. Or they get mid-performance and they go into their upper voice because the upper voice is the first to go, and their upper voice is just off, and their pitch is off. So we don't want to force the folds together. We want to do it systematically through proper bel canto breathing and breath preparation, which we'll talk about later. So going back to our exercises, descending versus ascending. Descending exercises are going to release, whereas ascending exercises are going to challenge the folds. Okay, so when you are picking exercises after you've already found the starting pitch, you're always going to start with a descending exercise. I don't care if it's 3-note descending or 5-note. But you are not going to start with an ascending exercise because you're starting right from the beginning when you really should be releasing the middle voice, the speaking voice. You're starting to challenge it. And what's going to happen is you're going to start with or increasing tension in the folds when your job at this point should be to release tension so that you can eventually challenge the fold towards the middle of your exercising. Okay, so appoggio and the creation and the building of appoggio. So what Dan would do is he would have you sing through a releasing exercise. Okay. Now what he would do is he maybe wah 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 or va 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 or ya ya ya. We'll talk about what each of these do because it's different. The wah is farthest from the folds. The va is more dentale, so it's helping to release sound to the front teeth, which for men will increase the sensation of squillo, or the sensation of the singer's connection to squillo. And then ya, of course, tugs on the pillars. It's a little more invasive, but it does encourage more squillo. So you have your exercise, and he would take you up in half steps. Wah, wah, wah. 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 And of course, as we'll talk about, we will talk about it. We will talk about breath. We will talk about breath coordination within the bel canto methodology. But right now, let's just focus on appoggio and expounding upon what appoggio is and how it's built. So we take you up. And then there come a point where he would hear the inklings of appoggio. Now, you should know as teachers where appoggio typically sits. It's typically a third apart. So for tenors, it's typically C sharp or D. Okay, that's usually where you'll hear appoggiare. I encourage you, don't make a presumption of what a voice is based on where they're speaking. If they're speaking very high, don't just say it must be a tenor. They could be a high baritone, a baritone. You have no idea. A third down will be a baritone. Yeah, baritone around a B, B flat, and a bass around G, G flat or F sharp. Okay, these are the places you're going to hear the beginnings of appoggio. And what would singers and teachers of today do? They would just take you straight through and straight up, and that is not the way bel canto voices were built. So what they would do is say I hear on my wah wah wah. I'll take you just before my appoggio. Wah wah wah, wah wah wah, wah wah wah. There's a little bit of appoggio, and I'm not doing anything. It's just naturally happening. Okay. Remember, singers and teachers, SLPs, these are all sensations that are natural byproducts. We are not making anything happen. We don't manipulate. They just happen to be there. So then after Dan heard it, he would take me back down. He'd just say, okay, let's go back down. And then he'd maybe take me back up again, maybe on a different vowel and consonant combination. But he would be listening to hear if he still heard the same quality of the beginnings, the infancy of appoggio around that point in the vocal register. And then he'd take me back down. And he would do this 3 or 4, maybe 5 times with different vowel and consonant combinations. He would release, then he would challenge the lower voice. He would not be challenging the area where he heard appoggio, but he would do this for weeks, maybe even months, where he would just be testing it. And why do we do this? The reason is because you have no idea where the appoggio is going to show itself, or if the singer is muscling in the middle voice. So you spend time releasing the middle voice because appoggio is a natural byproduct of a released sound. You need to make sure that they're not muscling before the appoggio. So you take them in and out of posture. You adjust the breathing. You make sure that they're not backwards breathing. You give them some exercises for coup de glotte, for reinforcing the connection of posture to release of resonance. But you do all this in the middle voice and the lower voice. Okay, and you do that because you want to keep testing. You keep releasing the middle voice and then test where the area of appoggio is. Go up and then come back down, and then go up and come back down. Okay, you don't say anything as to whether or not this person is a tenor, a baritone, or a bass. You know, I sang baritone rep for a whole 2 years with Dan, and he every time I'd say, Dan, I have to be a tenor. I can't sing this low. He'd say, you need to sing baritone rep because that's where your voice is right now. That's where we're working the voice, and we need rep to keep releasing it. So he would keep me with baritone rep, so that he could help release the middle voice. So after a series of weeks and maybe months of seeing and hearing that the appoggio is staying in the same place and they're not muscling, one very strong indicator the student is muscling is if when you have them saying up here, ah, 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 yeah, ma, like M-A, but in Italian, you hear so ma, ma, ma. You hear this in pop singers a lot. You'll also hear it in when you have a pure u, as in lu. And you say, sing for the females, lu, 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 or lu, 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 lu. And they go, lu, 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 lu. That is a muscled tone. And you need to pull them away from that. You need to work very, very diligently to get them away from that. Any is a sign that there is muscle in the sound. And you don't want any muscle in the sound because it will hinder your the singer's progress. They may be able to belt out and sing really loud in their middle voice, but it is going to throw off the balance of the upper and the middle voice. So we only work in this methodology with pure Italian vowels. Yeah, a, e, I, o, and u. That's it. Yeah, o, as we talked about, is the vowel of appoggio for men. U is the vowel of passaggio for men and for women. Okay, so we've talked about how we start exercise. You want to be talking to the student and figure out, where they're resonating. You want to check it lesson to lesson because it will shift. When you're trying to find appoggio, you take the singer up on releasing exercises, and you take them up until you hear the buildup of pressure, the slight buildup. You don't encourage it. You're just listening for it. Okay? And then once you hear it, you take them back down. And then you spend time working the middle voice to try to encourage more release. And lesson to lesson, you're going to listen to hear if you're hearing appoggio in the same place. Now, once you've heard appoggio in the same place consistently, you know that C sharp D natural is the appoggio for a tenor, or B flat B natural is for a baritone, and G flat G natural is for a bass. And you just keep hearing the same. You hear appoggio happening in the same place, and you keep encouraging them to continue releasing towards what's called the campana, and release forward, but feel a connection to the chest, and it's still the same. Then you can safely modify the vowel, okay, through that area in appoggio, but only in appoggio. Appoggio lasts a third, okay, a third, okay. For tenors, the minor third, okay. For baritones, minor third. Basses, minor third. You would take them through appoggio, and then you take them back down, and then you'd do this exact same thing for a couple weeks or months. You take them into appoggio. You want to make sure that it's staying in the same place, and you take them out of appoggio. Then, after a series of weeks and months, then you can take them into just touching passaggio, and you're testing to see what's happening when they enter passaggio. Remember, passaggio, passageway, Raz used to say it's like going through a very narrow tunnel on your hands and knees. It's very, very focused. But about a step and a half out of passaggio, you then open there's the blossom that happens. So this isn't just you just sing high. Bel canto voice building was much more in depth than people think. And the problem today is that many people think that what's newer is better because it's newer. When something works, you don't need to change it. People only changed things with reference to bel canto because they were impatient. Okay, you had singers that wanted to. You had new directors coming in that wanted younger singers, and those younger singers didn't have the patience to go through this full system, or maybe there just weren't enough voice builders to take them through it. It takes a lot of patience to work with singers, and because of that, they just said they were okay with the manipulation, and now we have mics at the Met. That was never a thing, because true bel canto technique allows for steady growth in the voice, squillo leading body, through posture, so that the sound will reach the back of the auditorium or the theater without any amplification. This is an art form. This is a very high art form. And like Dan said, when you're singing with posture, you actually connect directly into the sternum, which is the seat of creation, or into the solar plexus. So this is a very, very it's a very, very unique way of encouraging growth in the voice, but it is rooted in wisdom and truth of true bel canto. So I hear these silly people that are going with their open-throated nonsense. I learned that in college. It does not serve you. You will eventually fatigue. You're going to sound like all the other singers out there. You may sound loud, but you'll have no ability to sing piano, which is something that is a lost art. Listen to Gigli sing. Sing Una furtiva lagrima. una furtiva lagrima. There's a beauty in being able to sing piano. There's a beauty in being able to allow more body to open up, at certain points in the music, to not just sing loud all the time. It's a very belligerent way of singing, and it's a lost art, the ability to sing on the very, very simple connection. So we want to bring people back to the simple connection because it really is much more impressive. There's a reason why they call them, the great singers of old. It's because their technique allowed them to not just sing their entire lifespan with, complete vocal freedom and vocal power and vocal vitality, but they sang across genres. You have Bergonzi, who was singing Wagnerian roles at the end of his life. And from the singers that I know that listened to it, in the rehearsals before they had him doing all this ridiculous stuff with his posture, he sounded fantastic. You have, some of the older singers who, you can talk about Caruso or De Lucia or Alessandro Bonci or Kozlowski. These were singers that were singing. They were lighter. Some of them were lighter voices, and they were singing the heavier roles. They were singing Verdi. They weren't just singing the Donizetti. So this, although it takes a longer time to learn this methodology, it's going to build vibrancy and a uniqueness to your tone, your resonance that is unparalleled between you and the rest of the other singers in the world. So just to recap, when you're building appoggio in the voice, number one, you always have to find out where the voice is resonating. Number two, you always have to take the singer through their middle voice, and you have to listen very, very astutely to whether or not you're hearing the beginnings of appoggio in those specific places that I told you appoggio shows itself for the male voice. Okay, it's the mirrored image for women, by the way. So soprano is the same for tenors. The alto is the same for the baritones, and the contraltos for the basses. So it's the same for those voice types. However, we don't develop appoggio in most of the voices. There are singers who did have it built in their voice, but it's a very, very, you don't want to damage female voices. So we don't encourage it unless they're a contralto. But once you hear the beginnings of appoggio, then you change the vowel slowly after you know that the appoggio, the initiating note of appoggio hasn't changed. After you've changed the vowel and you've gone into appoggio and taken the singer up that minor third to passaggio, passaggio starts on the minor third up. So if it's D is the beginning of appoggio, F is where you would change to vu, or lu, and that brings more focus into the nares bone, more focus into the campana in the front of the mouth. Okay, and then what happens after that? A step and a half higher, then you can slowly teach the singer through what we call vowel sharing, how to open up the sound. So that is the beginning of appoggio building. If you want to learn more, book a session, a private session, jump onto our online courses, purchase one of those, and you'll learn a little bit more about the appoggio building process. It is a process. It is a lost art. You are going to really set yourself apart if you can grasp this concept and start training your ear to hear the natural, not manipulated or fabricated beginnings of appoggio. The natural beginnings of appoggio you will be sought after as a teacher, because you will be able to build voices that will be extremely impressive. Just to put it in perspective, Dan spent 30 years with Raz, on and off. The first 15 years he had his voice built and repaired after the university that he was with had destroyed his voice. He had it repaired from Raz, and then he spent an additional 15 years coming back to her after he would go and travel to document other lineages. Now, when he was in Philadelphia, he had sent some recordings, and the man's voice sounded like the old recordings of like Tagliavini, but a bigger sound. It just he sounded like the old singers. So much so that I remember him sharing a communication he had received from a competition, a pretty big competition that he had enrolled in, because he wanted to compete, and they denied him because they said he had copied or send in recordings of old singers. There's no way he could sound like that. So he did communicate back and forth with them. They didn't actually believe him. They just wrote him off because they said there's no way that you could sound like that. I think eventually he did get back through to them, but the competition had ended and they felt really bad. However, point being, this is a very impressive way of singing. And for your students, you're going to separate yourself from all the rest. Look at somebody like Bill Schumann. Bill Schumann charges close to, I think, $300 a session. But it's because he worked with, Franceschi. He worked with a real lineage, and Franceschi passed on all of her contacts to him. But he's very effective. He understands these old world terms. He understands the importance of building appoggio, and you can too. It's just going to take some time. It's going to take some diligence, and it's going to take you developing this educated ear to really give to your students the best chance possible. They will give them the best chance possible at making a career as a professional singer, a professional classical singer. Even your professional musical theater singers are going to stand out with this methodology. So one last thing before we wrap up for today, it's about vowel sharing. Burton Coffin is not bel canto. Burton Coffin vowel modification, if you're not aware of it, I've spoken about it in a short or two on social media. Burton Coffin was listening from this is what I was told from Roz. So disclaimer, this is not my opinion, it's what I've heard, or what I was told. Burton Coffin was listening to older singers sing with appoggiare and sing with appoggio into passaggio, and he couldn't understand it. And in his mind, because he was not trained in bel canto, he had this epiphany that I understand what they're doing. They're actually modifying the vowel, but they're not. I assure you, when I sing my arias, whether I'm singing high Cs, high Bs, high B flats, I'm singing in my appoggio, I'm taking appoggio to passaggio, I am singing purity of vowel. Okay? That being said, what we do is called vowel sharing. It's bringing the quality of one vowel and sharing it with another vowel. So, this is not vowel modification. We're still singing the pure vowels. But what we're doing is we're sharing the qualities. So, for example, after you built appoggio, the appoggio is in the same place, and appoggio is really what determines vocal fach. If you have an appoggiation, a singer appoggiating on D, that's or C sharp, that's a tenor appoggio. Okay, you can presume they're a tenor. You don't know what tenor they are, but you know that if they're regularly appoggiating on D, and then you hear them going to a passaggio on F, that's the tenor passaggio and tenor appoggio. It's not just passaggio. Okay, so now vowel sharing, once they're already doing this on a regular basis, you need singers to be able to sing with appoggio on all the vowels. So this is where vowel sharing comes into play. We're going to talk about this more later, but just to touch on it, to kind of introduce you to the concept. If I'm in appoggio, but I may have on the beginning note of my appoggio, I may have to sing the vowel ah. I may have to sing ah there, but I can't open it up. I have to have the sensation of appoggio. So what you do is you would share the vowel and exercise. So maybe you go vo, and take it down. So again, I go. So I'm sharing the o. I'm slowly morphing to appear a to share the sensation of appoggio with the a. So then when I go to va, 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 I still have appoggio in the sound. It goes for even when you go into passaggio. Passaggio, this is the beginning of my passaggio. It may be u. And you're building a physical sensation to what it feels like to sing more open vowels, but with the focus of passaggio. Now, you don't just do this right away. You don't just jump into this. This is something that takes time. It's a building process. Remember teachers, remember singers, remember SLPs. It takes time to build voices in this way. These are nearly forgotten secrets. I just want to give back and make sure that everybody is aware of them. I want to make sure that singers have the best chance at being their best singing self, and that really teachers are better equipped to remedy the problems that they're seeing in the voices today. Because singers nowadays are getting to the point where they are having issues with their upper register and they can't understand why. And it doesn't happen in the 20s, it doesn't happen in the 30s, it happens in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And they can't understand why they are either cracking or they're having issues with pitch. But the problem is simply that they've been modifying and manipulating for so long that they need a return to balance. So in the next episode, we will go deeper into things like breath coordination, posture, how it relates to the release of resonance. And we'll talk more about some of these old world voice concepts, these forgotten voice concepts. I'm super excited to be getting deeper into this information. I know it's a lot of information. You may disagree with some of the information, and that's perfectly fine. I don't want to say it's cognitive bias, but there's going to be a lot of cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance just because you're going to be told the opposite of what I'm saying. You're going to be told that because a lot of the singers today are singing with manipulation, that this is just the way that we do it today. And that's fine, but this is another option. It's an option that most people are not aware of because most people have not taken the time to go through what I had to go through of making no money, spending a lot of money after I already had multiple degrees in voice and opera, as well as speech pathology, but still pumping money into 2 or 3 lessons a week so that I can get as much information, so I can be as equipped as possible to answer all of the questions that singers and teachers may have along my journey. I mean, I never wanted to be. I had somebody once who said, "Well, they were asking about vibrato." I say, vibrato can be sped up and slowed down. It's you just need to know how to manipulate your vibrato." And I was like, "No, vibrato it's a natural byproduct. It's something that naturally happens without you getting involved, and the only way you can speed it up is by actively muscling into the pharynx. And that will speed it up, but you're manipulating, and that's going to cost you in the long run." And I said, "Well, the older singers had a very, very quick vibrato." I said, "Yes, because the quality of vibrato when the connection is so fine, is so close, and there's such a strong connection of the release of resonance to posture, or release of resonance through posture, the vibrato is almost bleat-like. I'm not going to say bleat-like because it's just very quick, but it does slow down over time just because of the thickness of the folds. There's the wear and tear of the folds as the singer sings more and more in their career. Like I said before, the folds start to get a little thicker, and that thickness will cause the vibrato to balance out. They're not going to go to a wobble. Wobbling happens from manipulation, prolonged chronic manipulation of the folds. So that's not something that happens in this technique. But the singer had said after we talked a little bit, "Well, you just know it all, don't you?" It's like, no, I had questions like you have, and I went to books, I went to literature, I went to teachers, and I finally found somebody who, when they were giving me the information, it made complete sense. And then when I applied it, I could replicate it. And so this is why I speak the way I speak on this methodology with the confidence that I have in the methodology, because I know from my own experience that this has helped me to sing and help my voice to grow to a point with my singing that I can sing through, like I had said in the first episode, I can sing through 2 full operas, and my voice feels stronger, and I have more vibrancy than I did before I started. Whereas most singers would say, "My voice is spent, I'm tapped out," but no, I sing my leggero the entire time, and I catch myself sometimes over singing or singing beyond the connection. But I want this to be an option for singers who are really looking for a true method, a true lineage that they can pass on themselves. I think that everyone has the potential all my singers and teachers and SLPs have the potential to embody this information and carry it on for the next generation of singers. And because of that, we are bringing this information to you for free to make it easier for you to implement this information and to apply it to your own students. But if you do want to take the next step, if you do want to go through our teacher certification, please sign up for some of our online courses at vocalmastery.podia.com. But that is going to conclude everything for today. Super excited that you all joined me today and that you stuck around to learn a little bit more about bel canto voice building. My name is Joseph Cianciulli. I spent over 10 years documenting the methodologies of Larilemen, of Manuel Garcia, of Modesti, through the work of Raz M. Evans and Dan E. Montes. I am in their succession, in their lineage, passing the old world bel canto techniques on to the next generation of singers, of teachers, and of SLPs.